Hi everyone, it's your book coach Liisa Kovala here. Grab a cup of coffee and settle in for a discussion about all things writerly. I'm the author of Sister's Winter War and Surviving Stutthof, my father's memories behind the death cave, and I'm an author accelerator, certified fiction, and memoir book coach. As a Finnish Canadian, I also love my coffee. In this podcast, we'll take a coffee break together to chat with authors, publishers, book coaches, marketers, agents, publicists, booksellers, and many others. Welcome to Women Writing. So happy you could join us for a coffee and a chat. In today's episode of Women Writing, I'm chatting with Marion Agnew. Her debut novel, Making of the Gods, was released in October 2023, and her personal essay collection, Reverberations, A Daughter's Meditations on Alzheimer's, was shortlisted for the Louise de Caroline Lawrence Award for Nonfiction. The Northwestern Ontario Writers' Workshop recently honored her with the Cowhey Award for her contributions to writing in Northwestern Ontario. Hi, Marion. How are you?
Hi, Lisa. I'm great.
Nice to see you. I'm so happy you could join us on Women
Thanks
Writing.
for asking. Yeah.
Of course. We've known each other for quite a long time. And I just want to show you this. Recognize that?
I do recognize that. A mug from the Hoyto.
I know. So last time I was in Thunder Bay, I got to see you, and I did an event at the lovely bookstore there, Entershine.
Yeah.
The folks there was amazing, and a couple other places I went to. And but the Hoyto at the time is being rebuilt, I think. So I don't know, how are they in the process? Are they in the process of that now, or?
Well, it's very sad. It was being made into condos, and there was the promise that the Hoyto restaurant. So the whole thing is called the Finlandia Association, and it's a big, gorgeous heritage building type thing, and it had a lot of artifacts from the Finnish Historical Society in it. But it was sold and being renovated and made into condos. And it also had this Hoyto restaurant in the basement where you could get Finn pancakes and all these Finnish delicacies. And, there was the counter where everybody just sat wherever in family style and sometimes. And it was a real landmark. And partway through, it was Christmas time, a couple of years back now, it burned.
Yeah. So sad.
And so it's hung up now, I believe, in court, dealing with some of the, insurance and investments and blah, blah, all of that stuff. But there is a core group of people who would love to see it continue to be rebuilt. And you can buy the Hoyto special pancake mix in various places. And I just recently read that there's an effort to maybe open a smaller version of the Hoyto restaurant at what it's called Goods & Co. now. It's a mall little, but it's all the old Eaton's buildings. So everybody's like, oh, it's an Eaton's, which hasn't been there for 30 years or so. Okay. But, everybody knows where Eaton's is. So anyway, there's talk of that. I haven't been, but, it's nice for there to be that connection to the past.
Yeah, for sure. Because that's probably the turn of the 20th century, somewhere 19... Mm-hmm. Well, the mug says 1918.
There you go.
This is how you remember your history.
That's right.
Getting a mug. I do remember having the Finnish pancakes there. So it was just an amazing place. So hopefully they can do something there. That's awesome. So I wanted to ask you about your writing. When did you start writing? Were you writing as a kid, or did this something you got into as an adult, or how did that come about?
Well, I wanted to write, and I do remember, writing always meant like penmanship and writing on that paper that's sort of off-white and it's got blue lines on it and the middle one is dotted and you're printing. And I was writing a story probably about, I don't know, a pea, something like that. But I didn't have any idea what its story was or anything like that. I would, when we had to use vocabulary words, sometimes I would make up a little story to use the vocabulary word in. But not really, I wasn't taking it seriously as a writer. I wasn't confident in being an artist and I certainly didn't want to talk to people. So I couldn't go into journalism. There was none of that happening.
Yeah.
Because actually when I came of age, it was during the Watergate time. And so, Woodward and Bernstein, and who have you got on, they didn't even have speed dial. Who have you got in your Rolodex? Right. And you're going to meet somebody in, this darkened parking garage or something. And I just was like, not doing that.
No.
So, walked a real straight and narrow path where you get all the good grades in English class because you love writing five
Right.
paragraph essays. And
Yes, yes.
that was more my style.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoyed it. I majored in lit as a undergraduate,
Mm.
and then I graduated, found that I had nothing that anybody else considered marketable in the way of a skill. And so I answered phones and was an admin and
Yeah.
enjoyed that too. And then I had a job that was tangentially tied to a university. And so I could go into a master's program and take courses for $5 per credit hour. So that's how I got my master's degree, was working full time and then going part time at for $15 per class.
Wow.
And it was really fun. And the only program that allowed me to get in without taking a test, because I was all up in my snooty about, I'm not going to take a test. I have a bachelor's degree in English. So it was a program like journalism. I still would have had to take a test.
Right.
So it was a new program called Technical and Expository Writing.
Ah.
And it is no longer, exists no longer, but it's sort of a rhetoric degree where you
Okay.
study theories of communication and writing. And it was a place where teachers, high school English teachers, went to learn about how to teach people to write.
Okay.
And there was cognitive, um, how people learn and how we know what we know about the mind as it is writing at
Right.
the time. And also it was computer documentation. There were several different kind of ways you could go with it.
Yeah.
And so I did that graduate program because I realized that I didn't want to ever manage people.
Mm.
I could talk to people by this time, more or less.
Yes.
I didn't want to manage people. I wanted to just keep doing the writing.
Mm.
I didn't, and all the career paths are, well, you work as a writer for a while I worked at a national laboratory in the States. And so you work at that for that writing for a while, and then you manage a small team of 4 to 5 people, and then pretty
Right.
soon you're managing a division of people, and then there's the group, and I didn't want to manage anybody. I
Yes.
barely wanted to manage me.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So
That's
anyway,
amazing.
that was my professional writing. And
Yeah.
then I didn't really start creative writing, although, I wanted to.
Mm.
You look at a book, it's got your name in the front because your dad gave it to you for your birthday, and you're thinking,
Yes.
oh, maybe someday I'll write a book.
Mhm.
But it was actually when my mom developed dementia, and I could not find a book about dementia. I mean, this was in the 90s. And so there wasn't, the online world did not exist for all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
And so and I was in my late 30s and I didn't know anybody who was going through this.
Yeah.
And so I just started writing it down. I couldn't find any place that said, it'll say, oh, she has aphasia. And I looked up the word and it means you have difficulty speaking. And I was like, what do you mean? Like she can't get the words out, or
Yeah.
she forgets the words, or you don't know what they mean, or because she seemed very fluent at sometimes and not at others. And so I just started writing down what I was seeing.
Right.
And that grew from there. And I realized I could make this into scenes. And
Mhm.
I got feedback that there was this new kind of a thing called creative nonfiction
Right.
that was being taught, personal essays. And it wasn't memoir, but it was kind of reconstructed scenes sometimes. And there's all that discussion around what's true and what's real and what's
Yeah.
fact, all of that stuff.
Yeah. I
So
love
that's
that.
really when I got into it, was actually late 90s, but I didn't really take it seriously and start seriously working until right around 2000, 2002, 2004,
Yeah.
that time
Yeah.
frame.
Yeah. That's so similar to my experience. Always wanting to write, always kind of in the back of my mind, making up stories in my head. But then until I started working on my dad's story, I didn't get serious, right? And
Mhm.
that's when that need and comes together with the circumstances. Sorry, my puppy is barking over here. He's making an appearance. We'll see how it goes. Sometimes it doesn't go so well, and I have to let her go, but I'm going to try to keep her here for a bit. Um, so so you wrote about your like as you're experiencing all this with your mom, how long would you say you spent working on that project like with her? Like would it have been a year or longer?
Oh, longer. My mom had already, she was already beyond the point of working with me on it.
Yes.
I was just observing.
Yes.
And because we, of course, were in such denial that we pretended it wasn't happening for as long as absolutely possible.
Mhm.
And I'm really not, I mean, she was able to benefit from some medication, but there really wasn't a lot of that either.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was just writing more or less for me, and because I felt that some of that other people might benefit from this, and I just really wasn't sure what form it would take. So I wrote and wrote and wrote, and she died in 2000, and I thought, okay, well, that's that. But
Mhm.
when somebody dies, that doesn't mean they're gone.
No,
I mean, that sounds kind of woo-woo, but
no, it's
that's
true.
that's really true. You still have, or I still had a lot to process around her death, especially because I really wanted, I mean, I missed her. And I'm not saying that she wasn't always herself, because I
Mhm.
want to honor the part of her even in her illness.
Mm.
But she was different. And I missed the rest of the other mothers that I had known.
Right.
And so it took a while of figuring out personal essay, how that even works,
Hmm.
and what it was I was trying to say about things. And I think I published the first one. I sent it off to a contest, and the literary journal is long defunct.
Mm.
And it placed in a contest or something. And I thought, okay, well, this is something. And then living in Canada, there's the Creative Nonfiction Collective, which I joined, and there's other like it uses a lot of the same techniques as fiction. So I was writing short stories also.
Yeah.
And so I published here and there. One of them was shortlisted for the CBC Literary Awards before they became a big deal like they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Awesome.
and then I would send them to literary journals, and a few would appear here and there. And but really, after about 2015 is when I got really serious about pulling it all together. And finally, it was released as a collection in fall of 2019.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
it was, 20 years
Yeah.
since the actual events had happened. And I was really learning the process and the craft of writing, and where I'm comfortable. I had to grow up past um, some of the adolescence that kind of came back up. And
Yeah.
then, my dad also passed away during that time.
Right.
We had him for 7 years after mom died, and that was
Yeah.
really great. Lucy and I had butted heads a little bit while she was ill, but we came back together in those
Yeah.
7 years. And so that gave me a little bit different experience.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, this sounds mean, but after somebody dies, it's easier to write about them in some ways,
Mm.
because you're not worried about what they think you'll say.
Yeah.
And just taking away that worry made me not say, I didn't want to say mean things about them, or
Yeah.
didn't need to pull my punches, but then I didn't want to punch either, if that makes
Right.
sense.
That does make sense. And I think it's really typical with a first book, especially that it does take a lot of time, 10, 20 years, because you're learning craft, you're learning how to tell the story. Like you had all those notes and all that information you'd gathered during the time, but like, what do you do with it? Like, it's such a challenge. And I think you're right. Like that whole processing, that relationship was like and how it changed over time and who she was in different stages. I know the same thing with my dad, like with Alzheimer's, there's parts that I thought, oh, this is him. And other parts I'm like, what's happening to this brain? Like fascinating and dreadful at the same time. And yeah,
Mm.
so fascinating. I don't know. It's such a tragic kind of disease, right? Like we just I hope that someday we have a better grasp. I know they're working on it, but
Mhm.
and you for we were talking earlier about the organization All's Author, and I think it's
Mhm.
you were saying out of the States. What is it
Yes,
that they do?
they are a clearinghouse for all kinds of information about Alzheimer's mostly, but also other forms of dementia. And so it's a website,
Yeah.
allsauthors.com, I believe
Okay.
is what it is.
Yeah.
And so if they have collected blogs from around the world,
Nice.
if you have like an uncle, there's probably someone who's written a memoir about their uncle with dementia. There's
Yes.
a
Yeah.
lot of self-help type books. There's a lot of when you can't take it anymore books. There's a lot of I'm worried and don't know what to do
Sorry.
advice. It's a really great resource, because I mean it has all different kinds of products. It's not just books, and it's not just websites. It's not web-based necessarily.
Yeah.
So
That's
That's
a great
a good one.
resource for folks to know about, because I think when you hear that diagnosis, it's like, it exists and you might have a vague idea of what it is, and I know it's different for everybody and different stages and all of those things, but to have a resource like that, to be able to go and see what else is out there and learn about it and connect with other people's experiences, just like reading your mom's book, a book about your mom, that helps people kind of understand what they're going through as well. So it's
Well,
so
my goal
important.
was to speak to people who were kind of taken aback
Yeah.
and perhaps look back with thinking maybe I could have done a better job of meeting her where she was. I mean,
Right.
I think it's so great that you worked on this book with your dad. They were memories that were important to him, and
Mm,
for you to take them seriously and to meet him where he was, and that's got extra layers of emotion to
mm,
go with it.
mm.
It's not like I mean, dementia in general, treating it, it's not like you're a doctor who can, put an injection in someone's IV and then they go to sleep. It's not
Mm.
that cut and dried. I mean, every person really is different.
Yeah.
And so it can be tragic but it's also something that happens.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
in some ways, it's not any more tragic than cancer, or,
Right.
as I've said, it's kind of a dumb system that we all have to die. I don't think it's fair.
Yeah.
You
Right.
know, we should come up with something better.
Yes. Agreed. Absolutely. Absolutely. And then, so you're in Shania. Oh my gosh, I'm going to say it wrong.
Shunia.
Shunya. I want to say Shania. I think I've said it because I've only seen it written. And
Hmm.
Shunya, and
Hmm.
in Thunder Bay. Can you tell us a little bit about that landscape? Because I think it's really predominant in, especially your novel, and your lovely Instagram posts are, that landscape is so gorgeous.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of been the landscape of my life, I would say. So my mom was born and grew up in Port Arthur, which is now part of Thunder Bay, and where we live. And we also have two family camps, and one of them my grandfather built in 1923 when my mom was a little girl. And so this 10 acres altogether has been in our families for 100 years, give or take. And in the 80s, a permanent home was built here, and we didn't own this part anymore. And then when I moved to Canada, because I grew up in the States, I moved to Canada in one of my kind of midlife crises at in my early 40s. And there was this nice man who lived next door who had taught English, and he lived in this house that I kind of looked at and wished that we hadn't had to sell it. But boy, it's a year-round house on this landscape. And
Mhm.
and so, I mean, we live right on Lake Superior, and we look over at the Sibley Peninsula, which down closer to the south of us is where the Sleeping Giant is. And so if you go north along the lake from Thunder Bay, you head up toward Nipigon, which is the place where Paddle to the Sea put in, if you are a fan of that childhood story about the Great Lakes. And so we're not quite as far as Nipigon. And then you go around the top of the lake, Lake Superior is shaped like a wolf's head. And so we're somewhere heading toward the ear.
Yeah, it's
And
amazing.
it's cliffs and granite and clear water like you would
Yeah.
not believe.
Yeah.
And all different kinds of trees. There's the evergreens I'm learning to tell apart at different times of year, and there's poplar and birch and um, the different kind of bushes. There's alder and willow, and I love it so much. It's just so beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's a way that also connects me to my mom.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I mean, I wanted to live here since I was 8 years old. It's one of those things, kids say, when I grow up, I'm gonna move up to Canada and live at the camp. And my mom would always say, you've never been there in the winter. And, and she was right. It does take some getting used to, but it's a beautiful place, and I'm
Yeah.
just lucky to be able to share it with my husband.
Yeah, it is. It's gorgeous.
Mhm.
Can we talk a little bit about your debut novel, Making Up the
Sure.
Gods? I
Oh, I
love
would love to.
this book. Can you maybe give us a little summary or a little lowdown on the story?
Of course. So Simone is the main character, and she is a widow who's near 70. She's been a widow for 5 years, and she is she's estranged from her family
Mm.
because her stepson and she don't get along. And so he lives down in Southern Ontario. And she has created a sort of life for herself where she keeps people kind of at arm's length. She lives in rural northwestern Ontario, just kind of north of Thunder Bay also, but not here. She has a little bit different landscape. But she too lives close to a family camp that is very important to her. And about the time that she thinks she might want to get to know people, she's feeling a little unsettled. Um, a stranger shows up at her door, who's a kind of late middle-aged man. Says his name is Martin and that he's related to her on her father's side, and he's her cousin. And she has never really known her father. And so she thinks it's maybe possible, and she kind of is intrigued by the idea, but she's pretty sure he's not telling the truth. But she's also sort of leery of getting involved with a lot of people. So the minister at church has asked her if she wouldn't mind keeping a young boy for a long weekend, just because his mom lost her husband and stepson in an accident that happened in January of that year. It's now April. And so Simone is like, I don't know anything about kids. I'm no ways I'm going to do that. And then she thinks maybe she should. And so she's making choices about how she wants to go through life. And she's also haunted by her past, by the ghosts of her mother and her husband and her grandfather.
Yeah.
So she's got a lot going on.
Yeah. Three pretty unlikely characters who end up, having to navigate those relationships with each other and their past. And like, it's just so beautifully done. And I love how the landscape that you live in is sort of present in the story that you've written. Like, it feels really, for me, recognizable because I'm from the North, but it's because you capture it so beautifully.
Well, I hope so. I hope it gives a feel to people who don't live here of what it's like. And also, I know that other landscapes speak to other people, so not everybody would love living here or love this landscape, but I'm pretty sure that everybody's got someplace that they think is pretty neat, whether it's a lot of people relate to desert or mountains or seashore.
Oceans.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's some place, I think, for everybody.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I really wanted to communicate that about Simone.
Yeah. Are there, like, a lot of times we think about writers returning to certain themes over and over again. Do you feel that you're doing that, or are you exploring different things in your different books? Because I know you're working on something now too.
I
We can talk about
am.
that later.
I am. Yeah, I actually thought I was writing about how grown-ups make choices because that was one of the big surprises of my life. Because you learn from Piaget that you become an adult, and then the next thing that happens is you retire, and there's nothing that really happens in between there. And then they invented midlife crises, and then they invented quarter life crises, and I was like, hey, those sound familiar to me because there are these times when you come up against something and you're thinking, okay, and it could be something like, do I want to take this job? Do I want to leave? And the people where I am comfortable, do I want to leave my home and go someplace for an adventure and maybe never come back? Or, you have to make choices all through your life. And that actually doesn't ever change.
That's true.
I am learning. Because even when you think you've made it, quote unquote, and you're retired, it's still like I'm looking around at people who are having to choose, do they want to move to Southern Ontario because that's where their kids ended up and they don't want to be a burden to their kids. And so there's lots of questions around that. And it's endlessly fascinating to me. Like, how do you not take an opportunity that means moving halfway across the country? I mean, that to me sounds like excitement, but even if you don't want to do that, but it's a great opportunity. Like, how do you not do that? But everybody has different criteria. And that's what makes people so fascinating to me. Yeah. So that's kind of what I thought was writing about. Like, what would it take to get a 69-year-old widow to really kind of change your ways and take some risks with people? And instead of whining about not having friends, maybe you call somebody up and ask them over for supper or whatever it is. And so it was kind of interesting to see how many people related my book to grief. And it is true. I mean, my first book about my mom, the essays, the nonfiction was always about grief in a way, even getting through grief or grief that doesn't dominate my life anymore as much as it once did, or it's different in tone or tenor or something. And this novel is also about grief because, the whole community experienced a tragic accident in January. It was a traffic accident, and I was working on it long before the tragedies in Humboldt or the
Yeah.
Lac-Mégantic train thing. I mean, I didn't even think about those. It was just I'd been observing some transport trucks coming too fast down a hill, and I thought that could end really
Yeah.
badly. And
Absolutely.
so there was an accident, and that's how Chen, the young boy who comes to stay with Simone, that's how he lost his dad and his stepbrother, with
Yeah.
about whom he has mixed feelings.
Yeah.
So for some of the characters, the grief really was kind of front and center. For Simone, it was a little bit less front and center,
Yeah.
but I can see why people think it's about grief.
Yeah.
And I actually had started my next novel that I'm working on before my first one came out, and I was writing about another woman who might lose her husband,
Yeah.
and I thought, I have written this before.
Yeah.
So I've changed some of the details in it. It's taken on a new kind of form for me, but it's also about giving up. It
Oh,
the things that we cling to and the things that
yeah.
we need to let go of.
Yeah.
And how do we what is the important thing about the thing that you're clinging to
Mhm.
that you need to let go of?
Yeah.
And whether it's, a cup and saucer that somebody gave you, or it could be anything. It
Yeah.
could be a, uh like if you went to a thrift store and you got maybe a tux jacket that was in navy blue and it's got lapels, and during your clubbing days, this is just, I'm making this up. I was not this person, but in your 20s, you
For
would wear it
sure.
out to the clubs and be like, dancing, and it has so many great memories for
Yeah.
you, and you don't want to give it up, but you're never going to wear it
Yeah.
again. So those, like, what is it you're trying to keep, and
Yeah.
what artifact, or what, even what land can you give up? Because I
Yeah.
think that happens about land as well.
I agree. Yeah, it's that idea of who are you now, right? Like so
Mhm.
it's part of who you are and it's part of who you were. Those items or those things that we cherish for whatever reason, or we have a connection to our memory. And like definitely I have bins in the garage of things that I never look at, but something gives me comfort that they're there. But also I know I'm going to have to get rid of them someday. And they're part of me, but they're also part of the past. I'm not that person. I'm somebody else, and we're at a whole other stage of our life. Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
fascinating. And that whole idea of loss and grief, I love the idea that folks are seeing that kind of underlying theme in your work, even though you may not have intentionally went to write about grief. Like I
Hmm.
do think we as readers bring ourselves to the story and we read through our own lens. And so we see in it something that we need, even if the author
Hmm.
didn't necessarily intentionally say, oh, I'm going to write, this is going to be one of the themes, like
Right.
I find it so fascinating that relationship between the author and the work and the work and the reader, which is complementary. I don't
Hmm.
know, it's so fascinating.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's been really fun to see what people take from it.
yeah.
Someone pointed out that everyone in my novel is fatherless. I had I had not even thought about that. I mean, to tell you the truth, I set my next novel is set in this region as well, like
Yeah.
roughly on Lake Superior, northwestern Ontario, not far from Thunder Bay. And it's because I there is so much going on in a novel that I need to be able to make something easy. And landscape and setting is something that I know about emotionally, and it's something I can look at out the window. Like I don't have to do a field trip to Greece, although sometimes I think
We
if
could
I
do
really
that.
want this, I should set something in Greece and then I'd have
That's
to
right.
go. But I don't mind. I love being here. So,
Yeah.
but that's why I started. One of the reasons why I started writing about this, and also it's interesting enough to me to keep me engaged in it,
Yeah.
even when the going gets tough.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I think that
yeah.
landscape, like writing about the landscapes we know so intimately, I think that's important. I know that there's lots of Canadian writers who write about the States or other places, and that's fine. But I personally love to read books set in other countries and other landscapes that I'm not familiar with. So I imagine lots of readers want to read about the North here in Ontario or other places in Canada that they're not familiar with, because it's something different for them, something interesting, something that they don't know, and yet we know it so well, like it's ingrained in us. And so I think it comes through in the writing too, like how we use the landscape as almost a character. So I mean, I'm all for writing the Canadian stories, the rural stories, the all the different landscapes, and not worrying about maybe what publishers might want, which can sometimes be, looking for a wider audience. So let's set it in, I don't know, New York instead of Toronto. I don't know if that's really the right thinking, and maybe I'm wrong about that, but
Oh, who knows? I mean, I think it depends on what you want, what your goal for the book is.
yeah,
And I can't control literary tastes or the marketplace or anything. Like I can barely, I don't know what influence I even have over it, but I just want people who are interested to read my book and
yeah,
and find it enjoyable.
yeah, for sure.
I will say I love and I'm very proud of my first book. There is some beautiful writing in it. It is also rooted in this landscape, but it is not as much fun to talk about
Right. Yeah, it's
because
heavy.
it's about sad things,
Yeah.
obviously sad things.
Yeah.
And Making Up the Gods is not it's not a humor novel. It's not meant to be humorous. It's not a Leacock type novel.
Yeah.
Mm, but it's lighthearted.
Yes.
And Simone has a sense of humor that I think she's had to have it to get to where she is.
Yes.
That's also important.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, bears.
And bears, absolutely bears.
You got to have bears in the north.
That's
That's good.
right.
What are you working on right now? Can you tell us anything about it? I know sometimes writers keep it really close to their chest when they're starting to work on something or mid project, but is there any tidbits we can hot news?
Well, as I said, I started working on it before this novel, Making Up the Gods, came out. And so um, I don't know why I was so surprised that people think that Making Up the Gods is about grief, because it does seem to be something I write about. And in my own defense, when you make a choice, it means you're not making a bunch of other choices. And so you have to let those go. So
Yeah.
there is grief in that. So
Yeah.
that's all I will say. But
That's true.
so my next novel is, I had originally, structure and plot, man, those can be really tricky without making it shoehorning people into doing things that they don't want to do and making it realistic. And what can be what is a really hard choice for someone to have to make.
Mm.
Those can be really tricky things to find.
Yeah.
But when I started writing my second novel, I decided I was going to organize it basically around the 5 stages of grief. So I don't know
Okay.
why I'm confused about people thinking that my work is about grief. And it may not last that way, but
Yeah.
so I have more and more scenes that make sense. And it may need to change drastically.
Yeah.
I'm on the second, third, somewhere in their draft. I know what happens, but sometimes it doesn't always, the path I'm on is not one that's going to take me there. So I have
Right.
to rein that in.
Mm.
But in essence, it's about islands and it's about maps.
Okay. I'm already intrigued. That's
Islands, because Simone was an island. People are
yes.
islands, but we're all
Yes.
connected underneath.
Yeah.
And maps I read Seth Godin, one of those, big thinker type people with a
Yeah.
daily email. One time he said, we draw maps to leave things out.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
I've
And
never
I
thought of
also,
it that way.
how much we depend, now we have GPS, but even as recently as say the 80s, there were the new databases, but physical documents they're really important. They were really important in the past, and they're maybe becoming even more important now. I don't, again, and some peoples, and some individuals and some groups of people have less access to that than we do. So, anyway, it's just,
Interesting.
there's a whole lot there to look at.
Yeah, and explore. That's amazing.
Mhm.
Are you a person who writes every day?
Yes, I do
Oh,
because I make myself do it. I
okay.
mean, I do because I don't always write on my novel or whatever particular work I'm writing on every day. But I take time in the morning and I I like art. I like colorful things and pretty things. And so I have markers and I have colored pencils and whatever. So I set a timer for 10 minutes and I do something. I have a coloring book that I have pens and I'm coloring pictures in the coloring book and I listen to a podcast, your podcast among them, and just spend some time kind of getting going in the morning because I am not a morning person.
Yeah.
So, and then after that, I sit down and do a little writing, and it's 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. Recently, I've been writing sentences about the previous day. I went through a phase where I wrote haiku in the morning. Um, I tried other prompts from various places, make a list of 10 things that are orange or those kinds of prompts.
Yeah.
But that way, I mean, it's very little time for me.
Mm.
And that way I feel like I've touched writing. I've been
Yeah.
thinking about writing. Sometimes I find myself thinking, oh, I got to remember to write about this tomorrow in my 10 minutes in the
Yeah.
morning.
Yeah.
So it keeps me involved in it.
I
But
love that idea.
it's really, and if it doesn't turn into anything, there's no pressure on it. That's
Yeah.
the other thing. It's creation for the sake of creating. I mean, nobody's going to care what my coloring books look like.
Yeah.
So, art isn't for
Amazing.
consumption. It's
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah. And I too am not I'm not a morning person. I never have been. And now that I'm have the fortune of being able to work from home, I do find myself like valuing sleep more and allowing myself to sleep a little longer than I normally. I still can't really sleep in, but just that little extra time. But I love the idea of doing something straight away that's creative, that is just, have a cup of coffee and have, do your art or do a little bit of writing or listen to podcast, like something that just eases you into your day, but also feels like you're accessing that creative zone. And then whether you go and write or do something else, it's kind of sets you up for the day. Like that is,
Mhm.
I might have to try that, Marion. I love it. I think that's such a good idea. Um, and are you okay, plotter or pantser, or in
Um,
between?
Planter, a
Oh
potter.
yeah.
Uh, I'm, I need to know where a book's going.
Mm,
Um, I need to have something about it that is keeping me going.
yeah.
And the current novel I'm working on is, I know kind of what happens, the big scene toward the end. It may not turn out to be that scene, but I've
Yeah.
got one I'm working toward,
Yeah.
and I know what is going to happen there, which also may change. So I'm working there, and I think every book is different.
Yeah.
Um, Last time I just wrote chronologically what happened on every day, and then I had to go back and I mean, I had several voices, but one timeline. And I had to go back and thin out some of that and make more important things happen on different days and cut
Yeah.
days off the end, stuff like
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
I'm sort of in between. I
Yeah.
would love to be a plotter
Mm,
because that it would give me something to start with every single day when I showed up. And I think that would be helpful.
yeah.
But part of me also, um, I don't know, maybe you've had this experience, but when I'm reading a book and I'm like, oh, I know where this is going.
Yeah.
Oh, this is going to be one of those things where there's these two timelines and then she's going to do this and then that's even though I don't know what
Yes.
happens, if
Right.
I can feel it
Yes.
in in the structure, like
Hmm.
it's like the bones are visible or something. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, this is
Yeah.
not as much fun as I wish it were.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't want to feel that way about anything I'm working on.
Right.
I want it to be a fun, exciting, well, I didn't see that coming.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's kind of wise to have that, know where you're headed, sort of know where, certain things might happen, and you have a feeling for the ending, but also allow yourself to go where this, because the characters tell you. Like
Mhm.
also they'll be like, yeah, we're not doing that. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's finding that nice balance. But I think you're right, like every project is different too. You might, I've tried all the things and starting to learn that I'm probably somewhere in between plotting and pantsing. Like I like a little bit of structure, but I also don't want to be too tightly plotted, and then
Mhm.
constrained. Yeah,
Mhm.
I think folks have to just figure that out and trial and error, I guess. And
Yeah, well, I'm a different writer than I was. I mean, not only did my
yeah,
novel take probably 10 years to write, but
yeah,
I'm different than I was, 2 years ago.
yes,
Not even because of external events like pandemics and whatever. Um, Even without that, the more I
yeah,
practice, the more different I become as a
yeah,
as a writer. And I don't want to do the same thing over again.
yeah,
So
for
I
sure.
want to push myself and see. And you would think in a book that's about islands and maps that there would be a map for how to get through to the end of the book. So I'm hopeful that the one I have gets filled in with wayfinding.
That's right. It's like the
Interesting.
explorers who are creating the map as they go, right? There you go.
Sort of.
Yeah, sort of. I was going to ask you if I think I just had that question and it just popped right out of my head. So I'm not going to ask that question. I can't,
Fine.
this is my menopausal brain, the foggy
Exactly.
brain. I had Marion knows that I just opened the window like it's winter time. I just opened the window because I was having a hot flash. So yeah, we're keeping it real over here.
That's right. That's right.
Um,
But there's benefits that come with that. It's
yeah,
like,
that's right. Yeah,
there's a sense of independence
yeah,
and gray hair doesn't take as much to
yeah.
tending.
Right? I know.
Yeah.
Why didn't people tell us about that? All those years of coloring my hair. And then when I finally went gray, I'm like, oh, I don't want to color it anymore. I colored it for years when I didn't probably need to. But anyway,
Hmm.
for all those people who color their hair, go for it. But, also it's freeing not to. So just saying. Um, oh, that question is popping back into my head. And I'm just wondering if um, y you have any kind of process tips for writers who are just starting? And do you think that your writing, like, does it get easier, or is it just as hard with every new project?
Yes, to both of those. No, for new writers, just write stuff down. Like it doesn't have to be perfect, but finish something and go back and revise it. Like I think everyone should be a pantser a little bit when they start.
Yeah.
And because you can't fix a blank page. I mean, that's just where I am right now. I'm telling myself I really can't make it into what I want it to be until I have something to work with. Like you can't etch a pot if you haven't thrown a pot on the
Yeah.
wheel.
Yes.
So like that. And also um other people are your best friend when it comes to knowing how your writing is affecting people.
Mm,
And I say also other people, you that can be you in 2 weeks, because
mm.
the you in 2 weeks is going to look back at what you wrote and say, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
Or, I know that was a really important moment to me, but I don't think it's really coming through. And sometimes you publish a novel and people tell you it's about grief. So I had lots and lots of help getting through with my essays and my fiction and short nonfiction and everything. I've been fortunate to be part of several different kinds of writing groups that gave me feedback on actual work, and that is such an important thing, giving feedback and receiving it, because it helps you say, I mean, when I read something that I've written, no matter how long ago I wrote it, I'm like, oh, yeah, this sentence comes next and this sentence comes next.
Yeah.
And if you have enough grammatical fluency in writing sentences and maybe even paragraphs, maybe even a couple pages, you're reading along and you're like, these all make sense, but something's not, doesn't really work for me among
Mm.
these sentences. It's like the thing isn't really, I don't understand what the point is, or something like that. And that is hard to do for yourself, but someone else
Yes.
can say to you, oh, it's beautifully written, but
Yes.
then tell you what is missing.
Yeah.
So your own eyes you can train your own eyes over time, but it's difficult, and having trusted writing friends that can help you, whether they are also kind of newbies or whether they are somewhat more experienced,
Yeah.
um, and they're just invaluable.
Yeah, I totally agree. And even I've had beta readers who were writers, but I've also had beta readers who aren't writers and just are readers. And they're so savvy, right? Because if you're a reader and
Mhm.
you, like you say, you're reading along and you're like, well, wait a minute. Like they pick out things that you don't notice because we're so close to those manuscripts. We've worked on it and revised them, our brain just fills in things that we haven't written on the page, but they can see it immediately. Like, but what happened to so and so? Oh,
Right. Why I thought his name was Henry and here it
yeah.
is, Steve.
Oh,
What
yeah. When did I
happened?
change that?
Yeah.
Exactly.
You know, search and
Yeah.
replace should have caught that. But
Right. And it
and
does
the
that
other thing I
automatically.
would suggest, and this doesn't work for everybody, but if you're starting out, write a short
Mm,
story.
yeah.
It's just because you fail faster.
Yeah.
And I mean, once you get over the idea that it's not actually failure, you can call it whatever you want, but you learn more quickly, I would say,
Yeah. Yeah, for
because
sure.
you can try things. I was just reading an essay that I published in another journal that has gone by the wayside years and years ago, and I thought, wow, this is kind of interesting. I wouldn't do it this way now.
Right.
I
Right.
would,
Yeah.
this is way too long.
Yeah.
Um, Very effective, but there's like 9 paragraphs where you just need one.
Yeah. I think that, well, famously, isn't it Alice Munro or somebody who continues to read, she used to revise her stories even after they were published, like just kept working at them to make them better and better. And I feel like I know if I look back at my first book, when I'm reading in public, sometimes I'm like, oh, I would not say it this way now, or that whole paragraph would be switched around. But like that just helps us understand that we've grown as writers too. So like that's fine with me. I'm so proud of that, but also I can say that if I wrote it today, it would be a different book. And
Mhm.
so that's because you know more. And I hope like in 10 years, right? Like hoping, as we continue that we can look back and go, okay, well, now I feel like I'm getting there, like I think
Mhm.
writing's that you can continue to hone your craft your whole life and that you'll never achieve that. Well, I don't think there is anything as perfection in writing anyway, but we can keep striving towards and get better.
And if it's hard, is that bad? If it's easy,
Right.
is it good? I don't
Yeah.
know. And I am famous for making things harder than they need to be. I mean,
Yeah.
that could be something. Is it possible I'm making this too hard?
Yeah.
That I tend to do to myself,
Yeah.
but also sometimes writing flows and sometimes it doesn't,
It's true.
and that doesn't mean that you're not doing the right thing or
Hmm.
it just I I think you can observe how your process is working without necessarily judging it.
I love
Saying,
that.
oh, I'm not meant to be a writer because it's so hard for me.
Yeah.
Well, Hemingway didn't write a whole lot of words and he labored over every one, but he's
That's right.
had a great reputation.
Yeah,
He,
for
he
sure.
produced a lot of stories. So,
Mm,
you know,
agreed. Yeah. I feel like that idea that uh when we're writing we should uh that this idea of sitting down when you're motivated to write or you have inspiration. I mean, it's just ridiculous because when do you have that?
I
Because
don't know.
it's- I think it's a
Um,
struggle to sit down every time.
well, I find it when I sit down. I mean, that's the other thing.
Yes.
But I remember listening, you know how public TV stations, they will have times when they do fundraising things and they'll have somebody famous come on and talk about some creativity or some health related something or how to take control of your finances,
Yeah.
some self-help kind of topic. And there was a creativity expert named Barbara Sher, Sher, who came on and said, you don't have to wait for inspiration. You brush your teeth every day, twice a day. You're never inspired to do that. And you do it every day. So this,
Yep.
your creativity doesn't need to be done by inspiration. You can just
Yeah.
do it.
I love that. And I find too that often when I'm feeling my worst and I just have no energy and I just don't want to, and I just make myself, I'll just think, okay, I'll just write for 10 minutes, then I'm done for the day. It just turns into hours. And I often produce some of the best stuff because I don't know why, but your head says, no, 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 we don't want to do this. And then it's fine. And when I feel inspired, I don't know that the writing's any better. Like, I just don't think that you can listen to that little voice because it's going to lead you astray. It won't
Or
get you to your desk.
sit down inspired or no.
Yes. Yeah.
I
Just
mean,
do
be
it.
grateful if it feels inspiring, but
Yeah.
don't count on it.
I agree that I with that for sure. For sure. Any favorite places to write? Do you have a spot in your house or do you like to go out of your house or?
I used to go pre-pandemic. I would go every Friday to a coffee place in town, It was also a day that I could then, so I met up with two other writers in the morning, and it was more of a check-in. Sometimes we'd all bring work to work on, and sometimes it was more like gossip.
Yeah.
But then I would stay and do a couple of hours of work, and I did a lot of revising there.
Mm.
And then I would run errands because we're
Yeah.
about a half hour out of town. So
Yeah.
it was far enough away. And it also gave me something where I could say, okay, I'm not able to work on that piece of writing right now, but I can work on it Friday in the morning. That will be my time to work on it. And that calms my feeling of, oh, I'm never going to get it done. I'm
Yeah.
never going to. It kind of allotted time helps me process.
Yeah. For
So I
sure.
used to do that pre-pandemic, and I've tried to do it again, but um it's not as easy for me. It's cold.
Yeah.
In January and February, it gets really cold.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It
and
does.
I'm pretty good about it in different months. Sometimes it works out better, but we've got more other appointments sometimes that get in the way of a particular day. So I'm not as regular as I was to
Yeah.
go to a coffee shop. But I do I have a desk in the basement in my office, but that tends to be where the business happens. That's
Yeah.
where I sort the income tax stuff, and that's my filing cabinets are down there. So I'm currently sitting at my dining room table,
Yeah.
and I mean, I can see out the windows here. I can from the basement as well, but
Mm.
it's I like it here. I like
Yeah.
being able to look out. I'm on the same level where most of the action, if there's any action in the house, is happening. I
Yeah.
can get up really quickly to grab the phone or to make coffee or whatever it is. So I like being in this place. And there's just two of us. And we
Mm.
have a lot of horizontal surfaces, so I can set up on any one of them really.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so funny that when I was younger, I always wanted this lovely office, writing space, yada, yada, yada. And I do have this great space that I love, but also you're right. Like I spend way less time actually writing at my desk than I do on the couch because like you just want to be comfortable. You want, like you say, the light, and I want to have a little view. So it's just really funny the kinds of, dream spaces we want. And then actually what we just want is a space to that we can be comfortable in. And a coffee shop can really do it for people, and just to have a cup of coffee or tea or whatever, and get into the zone. But yeah, 100%. My dining room table, same thing, works like a charm.
And sometimes, I mean, I think people even in offices do this too.
Yeah.
They do their meetings in a different room, and they do their take care of the emails and filing and all that kind of stuff happens in one place, but they may
Yeah.
go for a walk and get inspiration and then
Yeah.
come back and do work.
Yeah.
And that also helps if I'm trying to revise. I will work on something and work on it and work on it. And then I get a clean draft and I print it out and I make a note on it that says proof this and then submit it.
Yeah.
And then I go for a walk. And while I'm out walking, I'm like, oh no, now
Okay.
I know what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
And I go back and revise it completely.
Walking
So
is amazing for that.
it really
Yeah.
is.
I
Yeah.
love a walk for that. Or when I'm having a trouble with a scene and just go for a walk and think through it. Or if I'm with my husband, I'll talk through it. He's not helpful, but he'll listen and I'll work it out for myself. Like there's something about the movement that's really, really important.
Mhm.
Yeah, all the little tricks to get ourselves there, right? Somehow
Mm.
get our I'm sure somebody has done brain research on why we want to write in certain places or work in certain places, or what that, I don't really know what that research is, but I'm sure somebody's done that, because clearly the more women I talk to about these where do you write spaces type of issue, it sounds like very common responses. So I don't know, I'll
Well,
have to
and there
look
might
into
be
it.
something about it too where you're safe. You won't be disturbed, or that you
Yes.
can say whatever you need to say, whether you're doing art
Yeah.
or writing or whatever medium you're working in. But it's got to be a safe space, and it has to be a space where nobody's going to bug you.
Yes. Yeah.
For women who ride in the carpool line,
Yeah.
I mean, my hat's off to you. Go for it.
If it works, but
Hmm.
exactly. Anything else, Marion, that you have suggestions for new writers, or perhaps writers who are, emerging in terms of, well, whatever process or even publishing?
Um, I would um, just be clear that you can separate writing from publishing.
Mm.
You can get better at writing and share your writing with friends or peers or whoever you want to. And that you do have control over.
Yeah.
And publishing is a whole other game. Um, before we started recording, we were talking about how a writer has to be all things. Like I have to be my own tech support, and one of the things I'm really bad at. I have learned that I can as a writer pay an accountant, which has been helpful. But it just, you have to do all the things. But there's a lot about the publishing world that I don't have any influence over. So um,
Yeah.
one of the ways we did take control over that, though, my husband is also a writer, and he's written. He was a high school teacher for a long time. And so he started writing short stories when he was still teaching. And then after he retired, he began working on novels. And he learned kind of as he went along. And he finally had a historical novel that he wanted published. And so he sent it off to the publishers, as one does. And a year late would go by. A year later, they'd get back to him and say, oh, no, thanks. And he would send it out to multiple at the same time.
Yeah.
And one of them had it for a year and did a draft revision and we're like halfway finished.
Yeah.
And, going through doing some sort of editorial suggestions. And then we're like, no, I don't think so after all. And,
Um,
and so, I mean, for him, he's older than I am. The people he was interviewing, it's a historical novel about Port Arthur and the Finnish Civil War.
yeah.
And he's been too related to the Finnish Civil War. And so for that, he was interviewing local people, like what did they remember from 1955 in Port Arthur? And those people were all older than he was, and everybody gets older,
Yeah.
and we don't have all the time in the world.
Mhm.
And so I used to work as a book editor, so I've got somewhat developmental editorial skills, certainly copy editing and production skills that I can do. And so we just self-published his novel,
Yeah.
and not just, but
Yes.
we self-published it in 2017. So the tail end, just after the anniversary of Finland's independence.
Yeah.
And then right in time for the anniversary of the 1918 Finnish Civil War. And I'm still unable to have a crystal ball on how to, influence people to buy your book. But I know that it has reached people in Europe and
Yes.
Australia and everywhere. And we are focusing on making the best possible books that we can.
Amazing.
So he's got 3 novels out, and February is the month that I get to work on my work. So I'm doing that and working on a novel this weekend at a writing retreat. But come
Amazing.
March, I'll be putting into production a compilation, a collection of his short fiction, nonfiction, plays, and poetry.
Amazing.
And so that will also take its place on the shelf. And he has other draft novels that we may or may not get to. But
Yeah.
that is one way to kind of take control is too strong a word, because nothing's really in control.
Right. Yeah.
But it's a way to make sure that I can share my work, or where I can share his work.
Yeah.
For any other work that I'm doing, I still will look to traditional publishers,
Yeah.
hopefully, because I like that input. I'm able to give it to Roy, but he's less able to give it to me. He's surprisingly, husbands are sometimes not your best first reader.
Yeah, I don't know why that is.
Funny how that works.
I
But
don't know.
and he's great for a lot of things, but that kind of really isn't one of them. So
That's fair.
I look for that from other people, from other writers, and then from a publisher.
Yeah, I love that.
And so,
Yes. Where can we find your books, and where can we find Roy's books?
okay, my books are available at any independent or commercial, whatever bookstore near you, your favorite bookstore.
Ah.
Or your favorite library, maybe even.
Oh, yes.
Can order Making Up the Gods, or my essay collection is called Reverberations, A Daughter's Meditations on Alzheimer's. And so those are available in all the bookstores. We publish Roy's books right now through Amazon. I'm not really aware of another way to do that has such a wide reach, but that's what we're doing now. So they're available at amazon.ca, if that's where you currently are located, or .com. We have had people download them. They're available as ebooks as well. And so we've had people buy them from all around the world.
That's amazing. But
Yeah.
we'll put that information in the show notes so folks can find
Sounds
those
great.
books. That'd be great. And I love the Finnish connection. Roy and I were on a panel at the Finnish Festival in Thunder Bay a few years ago. So that was really fun to be with another historical writer with Finnish background, because there's not that many of us. So it was really fun.
Roy's a Finland Swede, which is even
yes, that's right.
so
Exactly.
even
Yes.
less. Yeah.
That's right, for sure. Marion, it's so nice to chat with you, as it always is. Thank you so much for
Thank
doing
you.
this. Yeah,
Thanks. Thanks for asking, Lisa. It's so great. And I am so amazed is not the right word, because that sounds like I would doubt you. I would never doubt you. But I am so impressed with all of the things that you're doing, the coaching, and how you're able to spotlight so many women in your Substack newsletter and this podcast. You're just like the little Energizer bunny.
Aw, thanks. I
Just
don't
going and
always feel
going.
like an Energizer bunny, but I really enjoy it. And it's only possible because folks like you say yes, right? When I ask, they say sure. And that's the only way this happens. So thank you for saying yes. And we will definitely chat again.
Sounds great.
Hey, take care. Do you have writing goals that you want to achieve in 2025? If you need support, encouragement, accountability, and community, join the Women Writing Circle. We meet bi-weekly to set writing goals and get pages done. Go to Women Writing on Substack and subscribe. Let's create a little magic this year. Thanks for taking time out of your schedule to have a coffee break with us at Women Writing. Don't forget to subscribe to Women Writing on Substack. If you like this episode, share it with someone who needs a writing break and a little inspiration. Happy writing! Thank you to Michael Jensen for his original music and editing, and to Mia Jensen for the logo design.